Did you turn off all your electricity and your volumes and everything?
I did. They are all off.
All your electricity is off. All your volumes are off.
For your panel of...
My panel of electronics is now firing away. I believe that means we indeed are live because all the electronics just came to life. So hopefully you can hear us. You can see us. Thank you so much for being here on our favorite evening of the week. So that's Wednesday. That's hanging out with everybody here because y'all are cool. And that's just, there's no denying that fact. So welcome to the awesome place to be on a Wednesday evening. Tonight, we've got some cool stuff. So I was down, so here's how this started. I was down in the fish room the other day, and I had to go down there during the day. And what's interesting, maybe we'll talk about this later, it actually isn't one of my things that I was planning to talk about. So we're going to start off talking about something I had not planned to deal with. But I was going downstairs into the fish room, and sometimes during the middle of the day, when all the lights are off, it doesn't smell great down there. And then the lights go on, and a little while later, everything is back to normal again. So every once in a while, there is an aroma that happens, and then it just seems to fade away over the course of time, like years, a couple of hours. So that made me think, you know what, let's talk about that on a live stream. I know I did the video about it, probably, gosh, I think it's been almost a couple years since I did a video specifically about smelly tanks.
Really?
Yeah, that was a thumbnail. I was so proud of myself because I got that fish with the big old nose. So
that's fun. I
actually linked that video down in the description below if you're like, you know what? We talked about smelly tanks, but I really like smelly tanks. I love to converse about that. I need more. Well, lucky for you, in the description, there will be a video about smells.
How exciting.
It is exciting. So, a couple of announcements before we really get into this stinky live stream. I even put that in the description. I said this live stream is going to stink.
And what do you put on your thumbnail? He picks my tanks.
I did.
He puts 2 of my tanks on the thumbnail.
I did. I put your tanks on the stinky tank video because there's more than one way a tank can stink. Yeah, you're going to get me, the comedian, tonight.
Oh, no.
Good luck with that. You'll probably want to click off in about 2 minutes because it's going to get really old.
See you later.
Yeah. Bye-bye. So, announcements. Yes. You had a video come out today. Right? Today, yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what goes on
Wednesday.
with the week. Yeah, it's still Wednesday. Wednesdays are a really long day. And that video was, what was the video?
Oh, it's 5 things that you usually don't find that are beginning fish keepers and aquascapers are told. They're kind of like random, interesting things that I thought everybody should know. And
it builds off the video that we did on Monday, which was about the misleading packaging that is happening on fish. And it's not new, but the misleading packaging that happens on fish tanks, which I find irritating. And it turns out that a lot of people also find that irritating. So, yeah, that was the Monday video. You built on it today on the small scape, which is your channel.
My video actually was created first, and we built the Monday video off of the Wednesday video.
Yeah, we decided to do a deep dive.
We thought it was just so, like, not cool, but it was, like, so intriguing.
Yeah, it needed to be said, as
really
they say.
Did. Yeah.
We'll have a video out on Friday on Primetime Aquatics. I'm still kind of deciding what we're going to do on that video. It seems to be my MO the last few weeks. Like, I've got a few videos. Which one do we want to do? And then Saturday you'll have something come out on the small scape, which I'm sure will be interesting and engaging and surprising and all that kind of stuff. So that's what
it might actually be the largest item that I've recommended. That's all I'm saying.
Wow, the largest item for a nano tank that you've ever recommended?
For the small scape.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So today, I thought what we would do with the smelly tank video idea is really we had 10 things that I think can contribute to a really smelly environment. Let's face it, if you've got a stinky tank, that makes fish keeping not all that great unless you're into that sort of thing. And most people I know are like, wow, this smells horrible and I don't want to deal with it. So today, that's what we're going to do. So what do we got?
Well, first we want to send a howdy do to our awesome moderators. It appears that we have both Mary Page and Myrtle in the house.
Yeah, and
do we have Clint?
No, I didn't see him.
No?
But Mary
Good.
Paige, welcome home. I saw in the comments section that you're finally home after a few months.
Ooh,
So
right.
that's pretty cool. Eric said he received his t-shirt today.
Oh.
Fits great. Thank you. Well, thank you. Glad that the
Sweet.
shirt worked out. Truth will out. Thank you so much for the super chat already. Big kudos to both of you for all the great info all the time. Well, yes, you made me say that. Big kudos. Thanks a lot, man. So thank you. I really appreciate the super chat. Appreciate all the support you guys have shown us. All right, so what do we got? Things that make a fish tank stink.
Okay, 10 things.
Yep.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, look for dead fish in or around the tank.
It sounds...
Dead giveaway.
It's a dead... Yeah. Wow. Apparently she's got the jokes today too.
I can join in too.
That joke really stunk. Yeah, you know, the dead fish thing is... It seems like it's so obvious until they're like caught up under a cave or they're just stuck in between a bunch of rocks. I mean, how many of you have had that where you've got a fish, you're like, something is going on with this tank, and maybe you've got a lot of fish in that tank, and it's like, well, you're not going to notice one medium-sized tetra that's died, but you know something's wrong because the tank's starting to cloud up. You walk by it like, that doesn't smell normal. It smells a little off. And it's a fish that's just kind of jammed in somewhere. Or sometimes they wind up stuck in an intake of a filter. The other thing that can happen, especially with fish that might be on a little bit on the larger side, is if they decide to, especially if they jump onto the lid, that can make a big difference. Mm-hmm. So that can definitely contribute to some stinkiness. Usually on the floor, they don't smell as bad unless you've got, like, I don't know, an arowana that jumped out of the tank and now it's stuck behind the tank and it's been sitting there for a week and you didn't notice a giant arowana had jumped out of your tank. Well, I guess that could be an issue too. But yeah, you definitely want to take a look for nasty, deceased things. Besides fish, and this is a big one, dead snails. We've mentioned this before, but if you have, especially, I don't know what it is about mystery snails in particular, mystery snails, when they die, have an uncanny ability to make a fish tank and the surrounding area smell like on a scale of 1 to 10. It's up there. Like in Fishland, it's probably one of the stinkier things that you can experience. Like a solid 8.5 to 9 out of 10 in terms of stinkiness. So, they're horrible. All right.
Okay.
Next one.
High nitrate levels.
High nitrate levels. So this sounds a little odd. You're like, how do you smell nitrate, especially when it's in the water? An experienced fish keeper will, and it sounds weird, and maybe some of you have this sixth sense, but it's what it is. I call it my sixth sense.
Yeah.
This tank needs a water change. Why? Because it just smells like it does. And I can't really explain that smell of high nitrates, but as you keep fish tanks for long periods of time, you'll just know. You'll walk by the tank and be like, yeah, this thing, it's been a little while. It definitely needs a water change. Now, obviously, we try to keep our nitrates to 20 parts per million or less, ideally in a planted tank, maybe a little higher. But sometimes when you really let those nitrates elevate, it's like 100, 150, 200 parts per million. In other words, it's been a while since you've done a water change. That can lead to some foul-smelling water. And in essence, your room is going to be nasty too, wherever that tank is. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What do we got?
Well, I find that stagnant water always smells, right? So if you don't have enough circulation.
Oh, yeah. So think about this. Have you ever walked by like a bog or a pond, and that pond has just got all kinds of lily pads and stuff on it? There's nothing really flowing into or out. We were just, my boys and I, we were riding our bikes down a trail next to like a forest preserve, and there was, even in this time of the year where it's still relatively cool, oh my gosh, that smell just hits you right in the face because there's no water movement and you're starting to get that anaerobic bacteria building up in that environment. And that can also happen in a fish tank where you get, I have found, especially if you don't have water movement in terms of maybe just an air stone or something that's just breaking up the surface area a little bit on the surface agitation, those tanks have the opportunity to smell a little bit more, especially if you're lacking water flow and all of a sudden you start to get that green hair algae growing at the surface, like maybe on top of some hornwort or some other types of floating plants.
Yeah.
That can be not the
Smelly.
best. It's a relatively easy fix. So I know a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm doing a filterless thing. That's fine. Maybe just put an air stone. If it smells, start to maybe think about putting an air stone in there just to kind of break up the water current a little bit, and that tends to reduce the smell a little bit. So stagnant water, and it doesn't have to be completely stagnant. Like I have found with larger tanks, so maybe let's say you've got a 4-foot tank or a 6-foot tank.
A 12-gallon?
Or a 12-gallon, but it's 3 feet long.
Yeah, I know.
And you've got filtration on one side of the tank, but the other side is basically there's no water movement. That actually can contribute to smell. In fact, some of you might recognize that because if you've got a fish tank that's got maybe a lot of plants, like this will happen sometimes in our mystery snail tank where the hornwort, it grows really, really, really fast in that tank, and it basically blocks all of the water current in that 20 long, and then all of a sudden on the other side of the 20 long where there isn't a sponge filter, you'll start to see a little bit of like a white cloud forming at the bottom. Like that's when you know, oh, I got to get this hornwort out of here, do a quick water change. It's the circulation's not going so well, and also that tank may not smell the best either. Liz, thank you so much. I think that sticker today is very appropriate. It's a
Very
smelly sticker. In light of everything that we're talking about today, thank you so much for really being in the stinky mood. All right, what else we got?
All right, now this one was one of yours. Okay.
All right.
When there's a sulfur release from the substrate.
Yeah.
How do you know it's coming from there?
Well, because that's generally speaking one of the few places it's going to come from. So the sulfur smell, it smells like rotten eggs. And that usually means that you've got anaerobic bacteria in the substrate. And by the way, a lot of people think, oh, you know what? That's what happens when you pile up sand. It's going to kill all your fish. There's two things that aren't quite true about that necessarily. One, it doesn't just build up under sand. I've had tanks where that sulfur smell will also build up in gravel. And that's especially common in gravel when I feed our bristlenose plecos, like Repashy foods or a lot of sinking pellets, and sometimes that uneaten food or like it'll start to kind of fall apart gets into the gravel and the substrate. That can lead to anaerobic bacteria building up under the substrate. And then usually that smell, when that happens, it's like, okay, we're going down, we're gravel vacuuming, and you can kind of smell the release. Now, so the partial truth number one is it's not just sand. That can also happen in gravel. And the second thing is, even though it happens, I've never seen it do any damage to our fish. I'm not saying it can't do damage. I'm just saying with all the tanks we've ever had and all the potential sulfur buildup, especially for a lot of our tanks that have a deeper sand bed, it's never actually done any damage. So sulfur is, and you'll know it. Trust me, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, that rotten egg smell, I definitely have something going on here. What's so funny? Do I even want to know?
Truthful Out said, I smelled something awful in the forest one time. Totally think it was a Bigfoot. And it smells just like a dead snail.
Yep, I've heard that too.
I didn't know that they smell exactly the same.
Yeah, Bigfoot was walking by our backyard one time, and it did. It smelled like dead snails. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. It's true. Eric, thank you so much for becoming a primetime partner. So glad you're here. We got a couple new members tonight.
Sweet.
So that's pretty awesome. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the experience. Mm-hmm. Okay, what else we got?
All right. Well, for me, it's if somebody else is feeding sometimes and goes a little crazy. If there's uneaten food or food stuck to the underside of the lid, or even if there's algae, that's another one, especially with those greenhouse siding lids that trap algae.
Yes. Yeah, one of the mistakes I think that I made is when I made the greenhouse lids, the polycarbonate, we've done videos on it before. It's a really great way to cover tanks inexpensively, but I didn't seal the sides where the little holes are, so sometimes water will get in there, a little bit of algae will sometimes happen. But that's actually two different things, right? So first thing is the lids themselves, especially the undersides. And so if you've got a lid and maybe like that's an area where the sponge filter, if you've got a sponge filter in the tank and so it's blowing the bubbles up and now the water splashes against the lid and now you're getting algae growth under that lid, that can sometimes create a smell. If you've got a hang-on back filter that's splashing up, so anywhere where you've got moisture on that lid, if it's not fully sealed, as most lids, usually at the back, there's a little bit of space back there. So that can certainly contribute to a smell. And the other part that is, I think, a separate issue, but probably, I said the snails were a solid 8.5 or 9 out of 10. How many of you feed your fish, kind of open up the lid or whatever, maybe there's a little feeding hole, you throw the food in there, and then the food tends to build up a little bit, maybe on the rim of the tank or on the lid itself. And that food, that fish food, gets a little wet over the course of maybe a week or so. And then you walk by your tank and you're like, you just catch a whiff of it, right? That's the kind of smell where it's not something where you walk into the room and it's like, oh, wow, something is really wrong here. The fish food on the rim of the tank is one of those smells where you just walk. So you usually have to walk kind of close to the tank and you walk by and you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck? That smells like a garbage dump, right? Smells like burnt hair and baby diapers. So that one, that's usually that fish food on the lid or on the rim of the tank. So if you wipe that all down, that usually takes care of that. But the worst part about that, maybe some of you have done this, where that's happened, and then you're doing like a gravel vac, you're in your tank. This is the worst. This is one of the worst things about fish keeping. Let's say you're cleaning and you're in there and you're grabbing stuff out of the tank and your arm accidentally rubs up against that rotten fish food on the lid or on the rim of the tank, especially on the rim of the tank. And all of a sudden you're walking around, maybe like scratch your head and you're like, what is that smell? It's horrible. And you're like dry heaving and stuff. And all of a sudden you realize you've got rotten food all over like the side of your hand or your arm. You're like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And then you're trying to, and that's so awkward, right? 'Cause you're trying to get in the sink and you're trying to wash your arm without getting water all over the place.
Well,
fish keepers.
Slam Boy has a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Feed your fish, not your tank. Words to live by.
That's
okay,
you know
especially
what?
for
that's
you
like
who
a
like
next,
to like
that's an advanced
throw
topic.
food into little tiny tanks, which I appreciate you feeding them. However, I know when you fed them, because there's blobs of food on top of my floating plants and outside of the tank. I'm like my own Poirot. I'm like, whoop, somebody's fed my fish.
You know what? When the labor is cheap, you have to kind of get what you pay for. And so sometimes you're going to wind up with stinky fish tank tops because somebody was just chucking the food in there. I mean, I feed the proper amounts, but sometimes, and I compensate. I'm like, all right, 50% of this is going to wind up on the lid, so I'm going to feed 50% more. So you just got to kind of enter that calculation into your brain as you're feeding. Like, all right, half this is going to wind up on the lid. Let me go ahead and chuck the other half in.
So do you really want me to say the rim? Because that's also kind of separate. Like when the rim of the tank
that's the smellier
also
one.
Has uneaten food on it that just sits there.
Yeah,
sits there and then it piles up. Piles up.
And the problem with that too is if you've got a standard tank and the rim is black or brown, sometimes you don't always notice the food is there and it gets trapped in between the rim and the lid. And oh my gosh, yeah, it's brutal stuff. If you haven't tried it, by the way, if you want to smell, like some people are like, I really want to smell something bad today. Just go ahead and give yourself a couple day lead time, put a little bit of food there and make sure that it stays moist and then walk away. I mean, you still have to feed your fish every day, but just wait a few days and then just put your nose right by the rim of the tank. Trust me, you'll experience something horrible.
Yeah, and
if that's what you're into.
Come back next Wednesday and let us know how it went.
Yeah. Just let us know how that's a take-home exam for you this week. That's a take-home
some
homework assignment. I'm big into that, being a teacher. So homework assignment this week is to get a little bit of food and put it on the rim of your tank and make sure that it stays moist. And then right before the live stream next week, go ahead and just give it a big old whiff. And then let's just see how you feel. We'll have like 6 people here because everybody else is in the bathroom. Like, oh, my stomach.
I don't think you're going to get a lot of takers with that.
All right. Well, I mean, only hardcore fish keepers would do something like that. It's like only hardcore fish keepers would probably be like, oh man, my snail died. Let me go ahead and see what it smells like. So if you really want to see what a dead snail smells like, put it in the garbage in like your kitchen and then just leave it there for a day or two. And I promise your whole entire house will thank you for that. Tesla Killdozer, thank you so much for the super chat. Happy Wednesday, Jason and Joanna.
Happy Wednesday to you.
Happy Wednesday. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Ty, thank you for the super chat. Best part of the work week is when you guys go live. Thanks for everything you two do. Well, thank you so much for being here while you're at work. I can't think of a better way to spend work time than not working. So awesome.
Well,
very cool.
Okay.
All right. So what else do we have in this stinky fish tank situation?
Well, what about like the filter media? What if that's like really, really dirty? Or like, you know, in your hang on back?
That's
been there.
Especially true. That's often overlooked too, because when something smells, sometimes people do water changes and they're like, oh man, I did all this stuff. I don't understand. There's no dead fish. Why does my fish tank smell? Well, have you checked your filter media lately? Especially if you're using a hang-on back filter. Now, obviously, filter media is not really going to smell if it's in the tank, right? So your sponge filters, your internal canister filters, probably not going to smell. Your sealed external canister filters, well, they're sealed and the water's going directly in. It's coming directly out of the tank. It's not really being exposed to the environment. But the hang-on back filters especially, if the media starts to get, like if you forget about it for a few weeks, like, yeah, normally I maintain this thing and change out the filter media, you know, once a week or once every other week. It's like, oh, it's been a month because you just forgot, or maybe you ran out of media and this stuff turns like really caked on with fish waste and stuff. That can stink. That can definitely smell. What else? What else you got?
Okay. What happens if the humidity goes up a little too high?
Well, then you sweat a lot. And it kind of stinks.
Yep.
I've noticed that in our fish room. That's probably not as big of a deal if you're keeping like just, you know, like what a lot of, I guess, normal people would do. And that's, I got a couple tanks and, you know, they're average size. That's probably not going to play as big of a role. But if you're someone who's gone down that path of multiple tank syndrome, MTS, and you're starting to accumulate a lot of tanks in an area, in a room, humidity is something you certainly want to think about controlling. We've done videos on that before, how to control humidity, how we do it with dehumidifiers and humidity monitors. But if it builds up in a room, it can make the whole room smell a little musty, and that can be not ideal. And that's the type of thing too, where if the humidity builds up in one part of the house and starts to spread out, it can kind of, the foulness of that air can kind of spread out to the rest of the house. So it's just something you definitely want to control.
Are you ready yet for my absolute favorite, which means my absolute least favorite?
Was I responsible for doing it?
You are, whenever it happens, yeah.
All right, lay it on me.
Feeding that food. It's like either krill or the garlic-based foods. And when you have a fish room, you know, we get it in every level of the house. And when you walk in that house, you have it with you. And when you walk out of the house and when you walk back in the house, right there again. So I say...
Yeah, there are certain fish foods that have an aroma to them sometimes. The krill, especially if it's frozen, can tend to smell a little bit. That's more of a fishy smell. Yeah. But we have some foods that have a little bit of garlic in that, and so if we feed a lot of that, especially some of like the pellets that we use will sometimes be garlic infused. And if I start chucking handfuls of that stuff into the cichlid tanks and the pleco tanks, that smell can linger. But I guess as far as smells go, can we just agree that of all the smells we've talked about so far, that's probably the most tolerable? Because someone could like walk into a room and be like, did you just make spaghetti or were you feeding fish?
No, it's not the same.
It's kind of not the same. If it was a really bad plate of spaghetti, if somebody just kind of maybe burnt the garlic and then burnt the meat in the spaghetti and then you ate that and cooked that.
Here's a suggestion. I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't just chuck it. That specific food, because this is literally how I see you sometimes. You're like little ways away. A lot of it winds up in.
Oh no,
but some does not.
But that's not going to, the smell's not going to be if any of those nuggets hit the ground, which they generally don't. I'm pretty good at getting the food into the tank, except on the lids of your tiny tanks, because it's just, there's too much aiming involved.
That's where I'm at in the basement.
So wait a minute, did you see this new little sticker? I have never seen this one.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
Little hippos emerging. Thank you so much.
Aww.
Hold on, I can't see. My eyes are bad. I can't tell the eyes. Is that ILVLL?
Let me see here. As you
I'm squinting.
Please talk amongst yourself while the old people try to read what this says. Ilville, ILVLL, or it could be VII. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That's a really cool sticker with
That's so cute.
the hippos doing their thing. Golden Rib, thank you so much. Always appreciate the info and content. Well, I appreciate you being here. Appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Okay. So yeah, the krill foods, the garlic infused foods, they can sometimes be an issue. So sometimes if you've got a tank and it's like, man, I don't know what's going on. I do my water changes. My nitrates are low. My filter media is fine. I'm a better aimer at putting the fish food in the tank than he is. Maybe it is the food itself that you're feeding. And by the way, that's not bad for the fish necessarily. And it's just sometimes it makes an aroma.
Yeah.
All right, what else we got?
Well, we talked about food. I thought there was another one. Oh, what about something under a tank? Like if water gets under a tank, you know that moldy, mildewy smell.
That's a big one. That's one. So
and then merge that with the food smell. And
there have been a couple times where we have had, and this has only happened with hang-on back filters, luckily, but there's been a couple times where a hang-on back filter starts leaking out of the backside. It gets a little bit clogged up, and now it's leaking.
Yeah.
And that one time it happened. We have like a small rug on the side of the darker side of the fish room with the brick wall and everything, where you usually see a backgrounds when we're doing our videos. And some of that water got in that rug, and oh my gosh, it was wet dry vac and carpet cleaning, and like it seemed like after 10 hours we finally got that situation fixed, because the 50-gallon lowboy, probably that filter emptied out at least 10 gallons of water onto the floor. Luckily it all kind of ran into the floor drain, but the carpet was wet. So one of the things that can certainly contribute, just be looking when you're cleaning your tank, kind of do an investigation, inspect the surrounding area by your tank. So especially, all right, is there any water? Is there any evidence that something has been leaking out of a tank? It's been leaking out of a filter? Any evidence of dead fish? Make sure you're checking all your power cords, that they're off the floor, nothing has fallen, nothing is in an area where, oh yeah, I went to go check out my fish, the floor was wet, I stepped on the wet floor and I got electrocuted. So it's a really good idea just to give your equipment and just kind of the layout surrounding your tank. Just look at it when you're doing your tank maintenance, because if something gets wet and you don't notice it right away, it can, especially if you have carpet, that's a big problem for those of us, or for those who have tanks on carpet, which is one of the reasons why up here in the upstairs part of our house, we have now just the one tank in here. And even if that, I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced water on a floor, but it doesn't seem like, so when you see let's say a 5-gallon tank, and you look at it, you're like, oh, that's not a lot of water. Put that 5 gallons of water on the floor, you will see just how much it is. It's a lot of water. I've had tanks where, like I said, these filters leak out 5-10 gallons of water, and it's like, okay, this is going to be a cleanup here. This is not going to be fun. Luckily, our basement is pretty much, it's all tile, but like I said, we just got that one area rug which got wet that one time. So yeah, those are 10 reasons why your fish tank may smell. All right, and if you've got others, leave them in the comments, the chat.
Yeah,
okay.
I've already seen one.
You've already seen them?
Yeah.
I see Carlos is here. The fish nerd, thanks for being here.
Oh, hey,
very
Carlos.
Cool.
Hey, we've got an anniversary today.
Yep,
Happy anniversary.
Yep, happy anniversary.
You share it with the Queen's birthday.
That's right.
Congratulations.
Carlos says, tank spills are the worst. I think that's one of the things that causes the most stress. There are a few things in the aquarium hobby that cause a lot of stress. One of them is when your fish get sick, right? So when you get ick or velvet, or even worse, like your fish are getting skinny, you have no idea why they're getting sick. That can be horrible. And the other thing is when a tank starts to leak, because that's, you've got a big job ahead of you. I remember when I was a kid, I was sleeping on the floor in our living room, and I probably was 6 or 7 years old. My little brother was also sleeping on the floor. I don't know why we were sleeping on the floor in the living room. We had our own rooms with a bed and everything. But sometimes we would kind of camp out. And he was maybe 3 or 4, and we're sleeping. All of a sudden, I wake up and water is running. And my feet and my legs are all wet. And I realized we were sleeping kind of underneath our 35-gallon fish tank. Well, it had sprung a major leak. And like one of the seams just went, psh, and it was kind of like just flowing out right onto me. So I woke up all wet, and I remember going, my parents' room were downstairs. I remember walking downstairs, I'm all wet, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, something's wrong. Like, what happened? They thought maybe, I don't know if they thought I wet myself or something. Like, no, the fish tank. And that was a fun time, because I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're trying to get the fish into buckets and do all this stuff. Yeah, not cool. Oh, I love fish keeping. It says brine shrimp stinks, especially when you don't clean the hatchery. That is so true. Yeah, live baby brine shrimp. I have absolutely found that to be true as well. Those little hatcheries, like we do, even the DIY ones, you really have to make sure after you hatch the brine shrimp, you feed it out, dump all that excess water and salt and everything in the eggshells, and then get in there with a brush and really clean that out, because you're right. Those things really stink if you don't. And plus, you won't get good hatch rates if it's really nasty.
Regina said cyanobacteria stinks to a whole new level.
That's also true. Yep.
But Captain Spicy says that he likes it.
Okay. Well, that's everybody's got their thing. You know, I know like there are people. Never mind. I'm not going to go there.
No.
I was going to say people have different smells that they like. That's true. James Manning says, when feeding fish in a community, does it matter if fish are eating foods outside their diet, like vibrobites for discus, but tetras eating it too? Yeah, tetras that's fine. Tetras in nature are going to eat pretty much anything they can get their hands on. So a lot of that is insects and crustaceans and things like that. So I don't anticipate that being an issue. The problem would be when you start mixing fish that are primarily herbivorous. And so that might mean the issues that I sometimes have is when we talk about mixing cichlids, like South and Central Americans with African cichlids. It's not as big of a deal, at least in terms of diet, if you're mixing like peacock cichlids or Lake Tanganyikan cichlids with smaller South and Central American cichlids, because their diets are more similar. But if you start mixing Mbuna with some of those South and Central American cichlids, I think the biggest issue with that mix is the diet. Because then when those Mbuna cichlids start eating a high protein diet, that's when you start to see problems. And so that would be true. I said Tanganyikans, but the Tropheus are Tanganyikan, and that would be a big issue for them as well. So, but the tetras and discus, no, I personally don't worry about that. I would worry more about primarily fish that are going to bloat on you if they eat too many high protein foods.
Mary Page said that she had a backed up filter that leaked all over while she was gone. That's a bummer. That's
not cool.
No,
that's not cool.
That's
a stressful thing.
Yeah.
Delta Charlie says, so why? I never actually finished my story. So why does your fish room smell before lights go on? That is an excellent question, and the short answer is, I think it's because when I go down in the morning, I feed out that garlic-based food, especially the singing pellets to the plecos especially. And I feed those tanks relatively heavily because I know they're going to come out as soon as the lights go off at like 9 or 9:30 in the morning, and then they're going to eat that. So I think what happens is that food sometimes starts to break down a little bit, and they're eating it. And bristlenose plecos are kind of messy eaters. And so I think that's what's causing the smell. So that's just my guess, but that's why. And then I say the lights go on and the thing goes away because by that point they've finished their meal. So yeah.
Oh.
I think that's the reason.
Okay.
Let's see here. Cheryl says, Jason, good thing you were sleeping on the floor that night. It may have helped save the fish and the floor. Yeah, you're not kidding, because that was on an upstairs floor. So, and it was carpet. I mean, it was probably the 1970s, around 1980. So I remember we had orange carpet. So like our house at the time, it was kicking. It was awesome. We had orange carpet. We had paneling along one wall. And I think one of the walls was orange, or like a dark burnt orange sort of color. Sweet. And we had new furniture. And it was the furniture. It's like almost like half leather and half fabric and kind of like wood framed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that bad boy broke. And I don't think our new little remodel was all that old. So that would have kind of like soaked the carpet and gone and sunk into the basement, which would have been a bad thing.
Horrible.
It's a terrible thing. All right. Hispanic Mechanic says, my house smells like I need more fish tanks. If your house smells like you need more fish tanks, you need to listen to that. Yeah. Your house is trying to tell you something important. Yeah. And I would listen, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable forever.
That's right. Embrace the MTS.
Yeah, embrace it. That's why we're here, is to make that worse.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right, let's see here. Who's Jenny anyway? I feed my betta meticulously and scoop up anything he doesn't eat. That's good, because especially if that's the only fish in the tank. Mm-hmm. Like I know for us, we've got mystery snails in pretty much we do have mystery snails in every betta tank. Yeah. We've got some kind of scavenger in every single tank. So I don't worry as much about like some uneaten food because it doesn't get uneaten. It usually somebody munches down on it. But yeah, when you don't have scavengers or like bristlenose plecos, cory cats, that kind of thing, snails, you definitely want to be careful how much you're feeding because once that sinks in the substrate, it gets really nasty. All right, let's see here. Jennifer says, that sounds perfect. I have 3 young angels, neons, corridors, a couple platies, and 2 bristlenose and a 29 right now. 55 gallons setting up to move the angels up. I just swapped for the ram or rams. Cool. Those are going to be 2 really good setups. Like it. That'll be exciting. Mm-hmm. All right. Eric says, setting up a new 65 gallon this week and looking for ideas for a breeding pair American cichlids. Any suggestions for a 65? So there's 2 60. Well, there's one popular 65 now, and that's the same as a 40 breeder, only taller. There used to be a 65 that was like a 55, only taller. But either way, I think if you're looking for a breeding pair of American cichlids, I would stay on the smaller side. I think that's going to maximize your success, especially if you want to. I'm sure you're going to want to add other fish to the tank, right? So in that respect, you're looking for things like a pistogramma. We talked about that before. Like there's just so many different varieties of a pistogramma. Rams are good. Curviceps cichlids, keyhole cichlids. What else? That's small. I really liked the Nanochromis. Check out the Nanochromis. They stay relatively small and are really pretty fish. So Nanochromis is a big one. Nanocara could be another one to think about. If you wanted to go a little bit larger, in a 65, I think you would do okay with a pair of electric blue Acara or even the regular Acara. I think those get overlooked, right? Everybody's like, oh, electric blue Acara, they're so cool. And they are. Mm-hmm. We love them. We have a bunch of them in a 125. Yep. But the regular Acara are also really pretty fish. What else in a 65? You could, depending on what you want to do, maybe take a look at Geophagus tapajos. It's probably the only Geophagus I would recommend because they don't get as large as the other ones. Mm-hmm. But Geophagus tapajos is certainly an option. Just keep in mind, we're talking about a breeding pair. So anytime you get a breeding pair of cichlids, American cichlids, they're going to become defensive and they're going to become protective over their area in which they're breeding and their fry. So you have to consider that when you're thinking about tank mates because sometimes that can be a little tough. Sometimes they'll drive the fish up into the corners. Just depends on the fish. Like the Nanocara, those things are really tiny, but they're aggressive when they breed. Like when they bred for us in a 20 long, I had to remove the other Nanocara, and I don't remember what other fish were in there. They were leaving them alone, and all of a sudden they started breeding. I was like, okay, unless I want a bunch of dead fish, I got to get them out quick. All right.
Father Fish is here.
Oh, cool. Welcome.
Hello.
Glad you're here.
He says, cleaning up a smelly tank now. 4 large 2-foot siren salamanders in a 55.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I had salamanders when I was a kid. I remember that smell. And you're right. But it's not just salamanders, right? It's like salamanders, frogs really stink. Turtles can smell really bad too. So when you branch out and you get away from fish smell. Mm-hmm. But when you add an element of land into an aquarium, oh my gosh, you can get some smells that you're like, I think I'm just going to go back to keeping all fish because the water kind of muted this a little bit. Turns out when they are doing their business on land and you got dead things up there too, it can be really gross. Really gross. All right, let's see. David said, got it free, thinking 2 Seachem Tidal 110 or 2 Marineland Pro 450s. I don't know what you got free. I'm assuming you got a big tank because, here, hold on. 140 gallons, says it right up here. Oh. So 140 gallon, that's awesome. So that's that's a 6-foot tank. You're definitely right on track thinking if you're going the hang on back route, you're going to want 2, 1 on each side. I think the sizes that you're looking at are very appropriate. I personally like both, and I make my priorities when it comes to hang on back filters these days. Obviously, they need to run. And so for me, the Seachem Titles have run really well. Even the old Marinelands ran well for me. I know when they get really old, sometimes they got noisy, but the Pro Series have been absolutely silent. So I'm still at a point with all my Seachems and all my Marineland Pro Series, I don't know they're running unless I actually look in the tank, or sometimes if the water level comes down a little bit, you'll hear the water splashing. But you really can't go wrong with either one. I would say the Seachem Tidal 110s might be a little bit easier to maintain because I really like that white basket they have where you just flip the little thing, unlock it, it just comes right out. So whatever media you've got in there, there's a blue sponge that they give you with that as well. So that makes it really easy to maintain. So you can't go wrong with either one. The other nice thing about both of them is if you ever need to put those on a different tank, or you have, let's say, oh my gosh, I just put discus in this tank and I don't want them getting blown around, you can adjust the flow on both of those filters. They're both of the filters, the Marineland Pros and the Seachem Tidal 110s. The motor is internal, which I think is huge because that's what keeps it quiet. They're self-priming, so that's really important if the power goes out. Some filters, if the motor is external, right, if it's not in the water, it can lose suction and then you just hear that grinding noise and the motor gets hot and sometimes that motor will just burn out depending on how long it is before you realize, oh, the power went out, I better go check my tanks. So both of them are good. You really can't go wrong with either one. You could also do one on one side and one on the other and see which one you like best. So,
okay.
What you got?
All right. Snail Team 6,
All right.
That's my favorite name. I'm telling you, if you ever make a shirt, alert me immediately because I will buy it and wear it.
Snails with like, I don't know, helmets on and stuff?
No, it's just a logo. Snail Team 6.
No, snails got to have helmets.
They
got to have helmets and shells.
6. It's totally cool.
Right.
Anyways, one of my tanks stinks like wood. Could it be the 3 pieces of wood my daughter found for me? They have a film like the other wood, but seem fine. So it's that film, that fungus that forms on a wood, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That can be a little...
It can smell a little musty. Usually it doesn't get too bad.
Yeah.
that white fungus is totally normal. Mm-hmm. It will eventually go away. You can scrape it off if you want and then just kind of gravel back it up.
Works good.
But it really, in my experience, it doesn't really even matter whether I boil the wood or I don't boil the wood or we soak it or don't soak it. That white film always forms and then it goes away. I think it goes away a little faster when we boil the wood, when it's possible.
Sometimes.
So, yeah. But, yeah, it's okay. All right, let's see here. I'm scrolling down. You're giving me the universal sign. Hold on. It's stuck. The thing is stuck. David, thank you so much for the super chat. Have you ever kept any yellow-banded acara? Yellow-banded acara. Let me just look that up because the common names sometimes might be, especially with the cichlids, I sometimes wind up using scientific names and then people ask me all the time. So, Aquadens mete. Yes, I have kept these. I'm just looking at the images. It has been a long time since I've had these fish. So, I'm just...
What about that one?
Hold on. Let me just look at the images. Yeah, I feel I have kept these fish. It's been a long time. I don't remember them being particularly aggressive. I don't remember how long I had them. I think that might have been a tank where they might have been in our 75 and then something happened to them after the red-tailed shark grew up and then there was other cichlids in there and they hit a lot and I didn't catch it in time and I just think that they weren't eating well and they just, yeah, but they're awesome fish. They're
beautiful.
They're beautiful and they're not particularly aggressive from what I can remember. Okay, let's see here. I'm scrolling down because you told me to with the, all right, so just now I'm scrolling up because you told me to scroll down, but I'm trying to get the questions.
Far up.
Andrew says, I love your videos. Keep up the ecstatic work. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Very cool. Let's see here. I heard having an earthly smell is good. I purchased a used cycled tank. I didn't realize there was dirt and soil under the gravel that the first owner had. Do you think that's reason for the earthy smell? Probably. That tends to have more of an odor than just your standard inert gravel for sure.
All right, you have to go back up.
I'm going. Finn Wiggles, thank you so much for the sticker.
Thanks,
Number
Finn
one
Wiggles.
jumping dude. That's like the highlight.
I know.
Okay. What would that be? Florida, New York fish?
Could be, yeah.
Philly fish? Well, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your videos. Keep it simple and fun. Appreciate your knowledge by experience. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the super chat. Thanks for being here and hanging out with all of us crazy fish people tonight.
Simple-minded and fun.
Yeah. It doesn't say simple-minded. It says
I added the minded
keep it
part.
simple and fun.
I added that.
That's what we try to do around here.
We like to make fun
We
of ourselves.
keep it simple, simple-minded, and fun. Carlos Fishner says, Tapajos are where my mind went. Tapajos are pretty awesome. They are really cool fish. A lot of colors, stay relatively small. Lav snails at prime time. I had a snail escape once and go on a long, long adventure.
Oh.
I searched and searched, finally found it after 3 days of looking and dealing with the utter stank. Whoops. Secure your lids.
Oh.
That is so true. I don't know if there's any aquatic organism that is a better escape artist than snails.
Yeah.
And the problem is, like I said, I use the polycarbonate lids that I cut out. They're greenhouse siding. So if you ever need really cheap aquarium lids, or you've got an odd size tank, especially if it's like a bow front, you're like, oh man, I just broke my lid, and you're like, I don't want to spend $50 on a new lid. You get the greenhouse siding, and you cut it to shape. Well, the problem is you have to cut out areas for like the two, if you've got cords like heaters, or you've got a hang on back filter, you might need to cut the back out, or you've got airline for an air stone or a sponge filter. And then the snails, what's worse is if they're breeding, well, some of them are, when they're born, they're really small, and you will find those things. It's the reason why. So we have a mystery snail breeding tank, the 20 long. We now have mystery snails in our Neolamprologus similis shell dweller tank. I don't know why they leave them alone, but they do, but they're huge. We have snails in our Juliochromis ornatus tank, which is another Lake Tanganyika fish. We had snails in our Caudopunk tank that then moved over into the 20-gallon. They just keep spreading. And what happens is they climb out these little tiny holes, and then because they're smaller, somehow they find their way to the tank next door because they're usually butted up against one another, and they wind up going in there. And next thing you know, I'm like, huh. And at one point, I just got tired of taking them out, because I would just take them out, put them in another, and put them where they belong. I'm like, you know what? You want to live in here? Fine. That's fine. You're not causing a problem. Hope the fish in here like you too. So, and that's how we sometimes find out that sometimes certain fish will leave snails alone. Yeah. Sometimes they don't.
Okay. Are you ready? Whips World. Hey, Whips World. I can't speak to bad smells because I have no sense of smell. That would work well here. But in the stress department, finding your 210-gallon half empty and the other half on the floor is very stressful.
I can't even imagine what 120 gallons of water is like on a floor. That's not even just like, that's not a, I think it's a 240. Oh, sorry. I heard 240. So whatever, over 100 gallons of water on the floor. That's not even like a leak at that point. That's a flood. Yeah, that's a big time thing to deal with. That stinks, man. Sorry that happened. Gawain at Primetime Aquatics, after quarantine, should you scrub the tank and restart the cycle, or do a 25% water change? I quarantine with Melaflex. There's two schools of thought there. So I can tell you what I do, and I can tell you that there are people who are extremely smart who do it differently. So my 10-gallon tanks, I have 9 of them on one side of the fish room, and I have another 3 on the other side that serve as quarantine tanks and also grow out tanks for fry. When I put fish in quarantine, one, I don't generally treat them unless I see that there's some obvious disease like ick or velvet or some kind of internal parasite. So if I put them in there, I keep a very close eye on them, checking them a few times a day for the duration of that 4 weeks. But if they go through the quarantine process and they're healthy, I assume the tank is also healthy. Out they go to the tank where they're going to find their final swimming space. Mm-hmm. If I treat fish, so let's say I get an ick outbreak and I treat that tank, if I've successfully treated the fish using my ick protocol, which I did a video on, which is basically, okay, you're treating the tank, you're increasing the temps if that's possible, adding the salt, adding the meds. So if I do that and I treat the tank successfully, in other words, the fish are fine, I leave them in that tank for at least 2 weeks after I see the last spot, 4 weeks in total for sure, minimally, and they go to the new tank. Well, if I thought the fish were safe enough to move to a display tank, then I assume that the quarantine tank has been successfully treated, and thus I still don't break it down. There is another school of thought, and I did an interview, I think it was called The Most Important Conversation I've Ever Had in Fish Keeping. It was with basically the manager of APET, which is a large fish wholesaler in our area. And he's in charge of fish health. And his perspective was that you should be breaking down your quarantine tanks in between use, bleach the heck out of everything. Generally speaking, he recommends not putting substrate in your quarantine tank so that the breakdown is easy. You can go ahead and remove the media. If it was a sponge filter, you can bleach that as well, or at least rinse it out, let it dry, and then you can always start a new sponge filter in your established tank for the next time you need the quarantine tank so that it has some beneficial bacteria. So there are 2 ways to do it. I'm not necessarily saying my way is the best way. I think the way that he suggested is also really good. So ultimately, do what you feel is what you think you're comfortable with. But I haven't had a problem doing it my way. Certainly, you're not going to have a problem doing it his way. So that's the 2 viewpoints.
All right, Joe brought up a good point here.
I just saw it.
Did you see Joe Williams?
Yeah.
All right, rotting, mushy plant bulbs are rank.
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
Oh my gosh, they sure are.
But he actually likes the smell of mulmy filters. Maybe mine are just pretty clean. I think yours are probably pretty clean then.
That could be.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody's got,
But
here's an interesting, maybe I'm just weird, and I don't know what it is, but I think fish food, remember the old school like Tetra brand fish food? They had like the yellow can. It was yellow and brown with the brown top. I mean, I say old school, but I think they still package it sometimes
like that. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to think that stuff smelled good. It didn't taste good because, when a kid, you're like, oh, I'm going to eat some fish food just to see what it tastes like. But you'd crack open that foil when you first opened it. I just thought the smell was really good. And it doesn't smell quite the same as it used to back in the 70s. Probably because in the 70s, they probably put like asbestos and lead in that stuff or something. Like, hey, to preserve the fish food, we're going to just pack it full of asbestos and lead. And I'm over there, wow, this smells really good. Let me have some. And then they learn like, well, maybe putting the asbestos and lead in the fish food wasn't a great idea. Let's take it out of there. Now it doesn't smell as good. So it's not as rewarding when you open up a new can of fish food. But so everybody's got like that weird thing where, yeah, it doesn't taste good. I remember the time when the boys were really little and they were like, Dad, can we eat some of the fish food to see what it tastes like? I'm like, I don't care. I'm not kidding. Like, you weren't even into fish yet. So we're down there and the kids were like, I don't even know, like maybe 6 and 3, 5 and 2. And just as they're taking a little piece of fish food, like a little pinch, and they're putting it in their mouth, you come walking down the stairs like, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. I'm like, I spit it out. And they're like, bleh, bleh, and it's all the fish food sticking to their tongue. I don't know if that's like child abuse or something, but
upstairs, boys.
Yeah, like that's it. No more cleaning the tanks for you two. Can't believe you let him eat fish food. I'm like, I ate fish food when I was a kid. I'm still mostly alive and okay, and I can function somewhat as a human being. But sometimes you just can't force kids to. They gotta just learn those things on their own. That fish food might smell okay, but it tastes terrible. It's kind of like the dog treats that smell and look just like beef jerky, and then you realize, oh, those were really bad. Those aren't beef jerky. All right, let's see here.
No.
David, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it. The Biatada, trying to add my cichlid community, and can you and dwarf cichlids, rams, epistles, and medium-sized cichlids severums? So I'm assuming you're trying to add all those together, right? Because you're saying it's a cichlid community. You're going to have one, and maybe you told me this before, and I'm sorry if I don't remember, but if I don't know the size of the tank, the best luck that you're going to have with any combo of South or Central American cichlids is usually going to be when you have one of each and you don't wind up with a pair. Because the minute you wind up with a pair, you run the risk of having fish defending areas. Now, none of these fish are necessarily overly aggressive. So like the mixes, I think is fine, especially if you've got a relatively large tank. The issue, for especially like the rams and the epistos, they're pretty much the same size. So you could get some confrontation there. Like I found severums, because they're so much larger than the others, they ignore the smaller fish. They don't see them as a threat, but just be careful if you start to get pairs. That's the big thing when it comes to cichlid community. Marty, thank you so much for the super chat. Message redacted, but I appreciate the super chat. Appreciate you being here. So,
hey, Marty.
Yeah. Glad you're here. All right. Victoria Lee creates, sorry, was excited. I don't know what you're sorry about, but okay. Let's see here. Regina says, I don't like the Seachem title because they spew a lot of detritus into the tank even after servicing. So I generally found that with all, and maybe it's just the way we clean tanks. Usually what we do, and I know this sounds weird, and I'm sure a lot of people don't do this, but with a hang-on back filter, as soon as you lift up whatever media is in there to like change it out or do whatever, any detritus that was on the bottom of the hang-on back filter, you're right, it's going to wind up being dislodged and is going to wind up back in the tank. So one of the things that we do sometimes with some of our filters is before we clean the tank, we'll remove that thing pretty much with the filter running. And yeah, it's going to spew some stuff out in there, but if you do it before you clean the tank, then you go ahead and get all that stuff out of there basically as soon as it goes. Now, if it's a lot, you could hurt your fish. So because we maintain those filters every week, we generally don't have like, I know like for some of you, maybe if you take out the media in your hang-on back filter and that thing is still running, it's like, oh my gosh, I just dumped like 65 pounds of food and fish waste into my tank. That's really bad. But because we maintain these filters every single week, if the hang-on back is running and we lift up the media or the media basket, like if it's an aqua clear or a sea chem, yeah, a little bit of stuff goes back into the tank. But one, we haven't done our water change yet, or if we're gravel vacuuming a tank, we haven't done that yet either. We can go ahead and put the new media in, put the thing back, and then basically do our water change. And by the time we get done with it, it's like nothing ever happened. Most of it's already cleaned up. So that's one way to kind of deal with that if one were so inclined to try it. But if you've let it go for a long time, you're going to have a mess. What you got?
Emily, I'm late, but hello from Okinawa.
Okinawa, cool.
Wow. Did I miss the chatting about smelly tanks? No.
We're still talking about it. If you want to, I mean, we kind of went through the top 10 of smelliness, but
yeah, lots of smelly
we're happy to talk about stank in the tank.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I wasn't drinking right at that moment.
That should have been the title. God dang it, I messed up. That should have been the title. I'm going to change. I am changing the title of this live stream when it's done to called "Let's Talk About Stank in the Tank." Mm-hmm. Oh, I missed a really good opportunity there. Oh
man, you blew it.
It's totally not searchable or anything, but who cares? I like it. All right, let's see here.
Wait, did you already get to Sans?
I'm still scrolling around here because the stupid thing. No. Hold on. So Ty, thank you so much for the super chat. You hold your thing here because I'm going to get to that too. Quick question. I'm traveling for work and found a store and I want to get some angels my wife has been wanting. It's a 4-hour drive back. Do you think they'll be okay? Thanks, you guys. Yeah, so a couple things. If possible, when you go to the store, let them know that you've got a long drive, because if they've got some cycled tank water of a similar temperature that can just be dechlorinated and use that to put in the bag, that would be better. Also bring a cooler. So usually, so here's the way I think about it. When we do our fish swaps and auctions, we have to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we are down in the basement by like maybe 5 a.m. bagging fish. What I do the night before is I usually put aside like a couple 30-gallon totes of water, run an air stone, dechlorinate it. Because it's downstairs in the basement, it brings it up to temperature because I try to put about room temperature water in there, and our room temperature is like 82. But by the time the morning rolls around, that water is ready to go. I bag all the fish, so they're in the bags at 5 a.m. We don't even get to the swap until like 9 a.m. The swap doesn't open until 10. It doesn't close until like 2 p.m. And so I've still got people buying fish that I bag at 5 a.m. at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And if it's an auction, they can go till 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. So those fish have been in a bag for 12 hours. Then they've got to go home with whoever bought them. And that might be a half hour or an hour. So the moral of the story is this. Fish can last a long time in a bag, but just tell the people when you buy them, especially angelfish, because angelfish, if they're young, like if they're dime-sized or quarter-sized, they're not as hardy as the larger ones. It's like, hey, I've got a 4-hour drive. Can you give me a cooler? Usually fish stores have plenty of those because that's how the fish are shipped. Can you make sure the water doesn't have any, high nitrates in it or any possibility of ammonia or anything like that? They can usually make that work. Okay. Now you, young lady.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you go up a little bit.
Go up.
There we go.
Sands, thank you so much for the super chat.
Thanks, Sands.
Can a single red-tailed shark live in a 30-gallon? Well, it can live in a 30-gallon, but a couple things. One, it will most likely have to live in the 30-gallon by itself. And two, it it is a small tank for a full-grown red-tailed shark. So a lot of times when you go to the pet store, they sell the red-tailed sharks at about a couple inches, and they're awesome, right? Same thing with the rainbow sharks. So this all applies to rainbow sharks, red-tailed sharks, the albinos, the standards. It doesn't matter. The thing is, if you were to go back and watch the species profile I did of the red-tailed shark, at that time, that fish was closing in on 7 inches. It was a big fish, and I think it's kind of hard to gauge the size because some of the other fish in that tank were large, and it was a 75-gallon tank. So they get pretty big, and I think a 7-inch red-tailed shark and a 29-gallon is going to look really out of place for you. And I doubt you want to keep just a red-tailed shark and a 30-gallon because I can pretty much guarantee you anything you put in that tank that size with a red-tailed shark, once it gets to about that 4 or 5 inch mark, they get really aggressive. So I hear a lot of people say, oh, my red-tailed shark's fine. I'm like, okay, well, have you had it for 6 or 7 or 8 years with community fish? Because those fish, so a lot of times, like the larger cichlids and stuff, a lot of times they ignore smaller fish. Like if you put medium-sized tetras in the tank, they're like, oh, whatever. Red-tailed sharks are like, no, I'm going to terrorize everybody. Even the smaller fish, like I know it's not a threat, but I think I'm just going to kill them for fun. So that's the issue with the red-tailed sharks. In a right situation, like a South Central American semi-aggressive tank like we've done with Severums and some of the moderately, like not moderately, but like the Geophagus and stuff, those get along pretty well, but the other ones not so much. So that's just, I'd probably avoid it. All right, Michael, thank you so much for the super chat. Planning a new 40 breeder setup. Thoughts on a pair of electric blue acara and some white skirt or phantom tetras? That's awesome. Yeah, that is a pretty cool setup. I had a group of electric blue acara. When I did the species profile, they were in a 40-gallon breeder. There was like 8 of them in there. I moved them to the 125 as they got larger, but a pair could certainly go in a 40-gallon breeder. Now, though, again, the one thing to think about is you are dealing with a cichlid. If they breed, they're going to make sure that those white skirt or phantom tetras are nowhere in their vicinity, especially once they have fry. So that's going to stress out those fish. The other issue is going to be if you want to keep any of the electric blue acara fry, white skirt tetras and phantom tetras especially are very sneaky and they're very quick. And what they're going to do is you've only got 2 parents and they're trying to watch all the perimeter and making sure nobody eats all their babies. But those little bad boys, they'll come in there, pow, 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 pow. And usually over the course of about a week, they'll pick almost all the fry off. And then so you've got the situation where it's like your electric blue acara have kind of kicked up the aggression levels, and at the end you really have nothing to show for it other than some stressed out tetras. So it might be better to just do one electric blue acara, make that your centerpiece, and then you're going to probably have no problems. I've never had any of my electric blue acaras even chase another fish. Other people have had different experiences, to be sure. I haven't seen them really get aggressive. What you got?
Okay. Assorted Aquatics wants to know, can you explain what the mild stage, moderately severe stage, and extremely severe stages of ick look like? I just noticed ick on my fish today, and I'm wondering how long I have until I can save them.
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
So we're talking about ick progression, right? I would say the mild stage is one you can't see. The mild stage is when you see your fish uncomfortable, when they're flashing on rocks, when they're breathing a little bit more, when maybe you've got cory cats, they're going to the surface of the tank a little bit more. And so you know something isn't right. Assuming your tank is fully cycled, right? Because that's another reason why all this stuff can happen. Assuming your tank is fully cycled and it is ick, that's the mildest form. And by the way, that doesn't mean your fish aren't in severe trouble, right? Because that ick, when they're flashing and doing that stuff, and when they're starting to breathe a little bit heavy, the ick parasites are already destroying gill tissue. But you don't see the spots. By the time you start seeing multiple spots on a fish, I would say you're now at the moderate level. Especially, it's like, oh, I've got one fish with a couple spots, and then a couple days later, it's like, now I've got 6 or 7 more fish, and they've got spots. By that time, I think you're at that moderate stage, like, this is now becoming more of an emergency, because then the next step is all my fish look like they've just been, doused in salt. That's severe. And usually when it gets to that point, I don't have a lot of success treating ick when you have fish that are absolutely covered in it, because the damage is really severe. Again, that's the spots that you see are on the external part of the fish. What we're not seeing is all the inflammation that's happening in the gills and all that stuff. So in the video that I did for ick treatment, I really stressed as soon as you recognize there's ick in the tank, you need to start doing if the fish can handle the salt and you've got no plants and stuff, get the salt in there, get the temps up, and get the meds in. I saw something interesting today on, I don't remember what Facebook group. Sometimes I just kind of scan through them just to kind of see what people are asking and stuff. And somebody made the comment that I've got ick in my tank. I can't get the meds for a couple weeks. I'm going to add the salt and raise the temps. And I instantly thought, you know what? If I can't add the meds, I'm not sure how quickly I would increase the temperature, because remember, all the temperature is doing when you do that part of it is speeding up the life cycle so that the meds have more targets. But absence of the meds, when you raise the temperature in the tank, all you're doing at that point is speeding up the life cycle. Now, of course, the salt is going to help, but it makes that could go horribly wrong, I guess. So that's kind of how I see it. That's a great question. Mm-hmm. All right. What else you got? You got something over there, ma'am?
Not at the moment.
All right, let's see here. I'm gonna look through this chat here and see what's going on. There's all kinds of stuff coming through. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. KCB. I haven't done a 10-gallon, but may if I need to have a breeding tank for pregnant mollies. Cool. 10 gallons are, always something nice to have kind of on hand.
More mollies.
Betta Lover. Hi. Does anyone know if a mono and a really shrimp eat pseudomogil rainbow fish eggs? That's a good question. I personally don't know because I never tried that combination before. So if someone else knows if the shrimp are going to eat pseudomogil rainbow fish eggs, I know those eggs are really tiny. So, I mean, I guess that could be a logical thing to think for sure. So, Danikin Aquatics. What up, fish people?
What up?
What up, dude? All right, let's see here. Scrolling on down, Assorted Aquatics. Well, go ahead.
I just had one. I lost it here. Hold on. Okay, here's one. S1. Have you had any really dark multis? I have one literal black sheep in my community multi-tank.
That's an interesting question. One, multis will get darker if you're using a dark substrate or there is a dark background or there's dark decorations. So that could be completely dependent upon where that fish is in the tank. So let's say you had white sand. All right, so you do white sand. The shells are obviously lighter in color, but in some part of the tank, you've got darker rocks. If that multi has decided, you know what, this area here is mine and this is where I hang out, they will be darker. The second thing that will happen is multis will turn darker if they are angry.
Ooh,
so sometimes
he's an angry elf.
He's an angry little multi-elf. So sometimes they will turn a little bit darker if they're angry, i.e. stressed. That can be due to territorial disputes.
The rock,
yeah. But the other thing to keep an eye out for, and this is the not so good one, is when they're sick. So sometimes multis, sometimes fish in general, they will change colors. Now, some of them get darker, some of them get a little bit lighter, but when they start to lose their color, just be looking out to see if they're okay. All right, so those are usually the reasons why, but yes, it does happen. All right, see, Noel asks, would Siamese algae eaters be likely to munch on my new Madagascar lace plant? A few other plants, have been made into snacks. Suspect the Siamese algae eaters since I never noticed before adding. Siamese algae eaters. I have them. I have them right now in a heavily planted, they've been in there a long time, a 20-gallon, believe it or not. They probably need to move. But I've had them in with swords. And I know the Madagascar lace plants got even thinner leaves, but I've had them in there with swords and Anubias and crypts of all kinds. And I've never found them to eat the plants. Now, maybe somebody else has a different experience. I just haven't seen it. So do you have any snails in that tank that could be maybe munching on a leaf that's really thin? Now, again, it is a very thinly leaved plant. But I just haven't noticed them to eat any of the plants that I've ever put in our tanks. And it's not like I mean, they get fed average, so it's not like I'm overfeeding them or anything. So if they were hungry, there's an opportunity there for them to eat the plants. They just haven't done it. Okay. Let's see. Assorted Aquatics, thanks for the information. You informed me about something that I had no information about, even after so much research. I'm glad. I think you might have been talking to somebody else, but I'm glad the information was transferred.
Okay, so
All right.
Elaine said, I get a garlic type of smell in my fish room. Not nice.
Yep.
Probably the food.
That garlic smell, sometimes check your fish food labels if it's garlic infused, because what happens is fish food companies will add the garlic as an enhancement. One, it is an immune booster, and two, sometimes fish that are really not eating, that garlic will attract them or will enhance the feeding process a little bit more. At least that's how the story goes. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but that's why they will add it. So if you've got that going on, that may be why. All right, Delta Charlie says, at Joanna, if Petco finds this live stream, the next product we may see is Aquarium Febreze.
Oh my gosh.
Wouldn't that be something?
That would be like little tiny like pine trees.
That'd be interesting because it'd have to be like non-toxic and everything, right?
Yeah.
That would be just like a big box store to make an aquarium Febreze, and you're spraying it all over the place and all this toxic chemicals going into your water. But that didn't work.
It would be fish safe.
Yep.
Like peppermint or whatever is the fish safe equivalent. Yeah, that'd be a great idea. As long as it doesn't go the other way, like when you walk into a Goodwill and that whiff of
why
massive
Goodwill?
amount. Goodwill, any kind of Goodwill or Savers.
They smell?
You've never gone with me? Like at all?
I've been to a Goodwill, or I know what they are, but I don't remember any smell.
Then you were not.
Other than when people dump off like really old furniture and there's like popcorn stuck in the cushions or something.
No, there's an overwhelming.
That's a whole different video.
Febreze. Yeah. Okay,
why does the Goodwill stink? Well, it's the popcorn and the cushions of the couches.
No.
All right, so hold on. I got it. It's my turn now.
All right.
You talk too much. James Manning. I'm 100% certain my electric yellow was mouth brooding. I've had her in a breeder box for weeks, and now she's eating duckweed from the box and not mouth brooding anything. If she's eating, she's probably not holding anything anymore. If she was, the issue could be the breeder box. That's a very small area, and sometimes they get stressed out by that small area, especially if that breeder box is still... breeder boxes are normally either in the tank, the original tank, or they're hanging on the side, so all the other fish are visible. That could be creating a lot of stress. Generally, if I want to keep my females holding, I will put them in a separate tank, like a 10-gallon. Another reason why a 10-gallon can be so useful. And then let them just kind of chill out and hide, because it's generally what they want to do. And if they're in a breeder box, especially those ones that float inside the tank and the other fish are going up to them, they can get stressed out and then just eat the eggs. So it happens. They'll breed again. What you got?
Ready?
I'm partially ready.
And that's funny that I talk too much, because that's a joke that I very rarely talk.
Yeah, even in real life.
I mean, really, yeah. I'm an introvert.
In fact, the most time that you talk is probably in your videos.
In my videos in here.
That's true.
All the other times I'm pretty much silent.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get my peace and quiet.
We all do. Except for the conversation in my head, I don't get peace and quiet. Okay.
As long as it stays there.
Boom. Okay. Jaden wants to know, hi, my betta fish tails got torn. What should I do? SOS. I would say two things. One, you need to know who's doing it, or if do you have anything sharp? You want to make sure that you don't have sharp rocks or branches. If you have some finer spider wood, but their tails, as long as it doesn't look real bad, they will generally. I mean, when we've had any kind of damage to some of the tails, they do grow back.
Most of the time. Sometimes they don't. It depends on how long the tear is. The other thing too is if you've got a pretty profound tear, just make sure it doesn't start to fungus in certain areas. So you just want to keep an eye on that, because that can sometimes happen where you get a little bit of fungus growth and tail, fin rot type of stuff going on. So just keep an eye on that. But yeah, sometimes they grow back, sometimes they don't. If you love your betta, you'll just love it no matter how it looks. So a Baldwin says, I'm setting up a 30-gallon outdoor pond. Will gouramis and platies be a good fit? I think the platies would be a good fit. because I'm assuming with the outdoor pond, one of the things you'd like to do is potentially see how many platies you can get when the summer's over, when pond season is done. The gouramis will most likely eat your platy fry, so that would, and if you're not breeding, then platies, well, it depends on what kind of gourami. So one, I would only do one gourami in a 30-gallon pond because gouramis are notoriously rough on one another, and it doesn't matter if it's a honey gourami, dwarf gourami, the big gouramis. Two, if you're going to do, the larger ones are probably not a great idea. So the 3 spots, the opalines, the golds, the blues, those are generally probably a bad combo with platies because platies are like one of the most easygoing fish on the face of the earth, and those bigger gouramis are not. If I were going to put a gourami in that tank, it might either be a dwarf gourami or a honey gourami, but only one since it's only a 30-gallon. If you want to see fry, then maybe just let the platies do their thing with some floating plants and see what you get at the end of the year.
Okay, so there's a number of people who understand the thrift store smell.
All right, I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you're in a club.
It. And who is Jenny anyway?
All right, so fish store stink is a thing.
No, thrift store, not fish store.
Thrift store.
I know that's.
It's fish thrift. It's so close. Everybody knows what I mean. All right.
Old fish. Old fish. Get it? A thrift store sells like old used stuff.
That could be why it stinks.
Old used fish. Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Peter says, any suggestions on what to do when you have a female that is getting bullied by a male dwarf cichlid and you can't take it back to the store or keep it in another tank? There's not much. I mean, it depends on the size of the tank. If you got a 125 and it's a dwarf cichlid, then that's a really easy thing to set up lots of hiding areas so the male's like, oh, wait, wasn't there a female in here at one point? Kind of like those big trees from Lord of the Rings. We seem to have lost our wives. That will happen in a 125. I mean, the fish are tiny. They got a small brain. They're kind of dumb. If you're talking about a 20 long, that's a much more difficult thing to do. So the only thing you can, if you're not going to try to move it out of the tank and you're not going to take it somewhere, you're trying to leave those 2 in the tank. The only thing you can do at that point is try to give the female space where she can hide. But even then, the male in a smaller tank is going to find that female. And if he won't leave her alone, he will kill her. So you might want to look at, if it's a smaller tank, getting away, somehow getting that fish out of there. Liz, thank you so much for the super chat. I have 4 natural blue acara. That's cool. But they are all different. One is 2 times bigger than the others. This sounds like it's going to be a word problem where I'm going to have to do some math. All right, hold on. One is 2 times bigger than the other. The other is 4 times smaller than the first one, but the first one's 5 times minus 6 times smaller than the other one. But there's 3 of those. What's the mass? Okay, hold on. One is 2 times bigger than the others. One has horizontal stripes. One has white edge on tail. If they are green terror hybrids, what should I watch for? Well, so one, you will get fish that if they can't, are we keeping you awake over here?
Just getting oxygen.
All right. Am I sucking all the oxygen out of the room? That's
you're talking too much.
One way to crush a rebellion is to suck all the oxygen out of the room, or to smother it. What movie is that from?
I don't know.
I said the line backwards on accident. You don't know what movie that's from?
No.
Madam, if I could make a suggestion, one way to quash a rebellion is to smother it, or to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Okay. Let's see who gets that terror. Who gets that movie quote? So one, that is very normal to have fish, if they're in the same spawn, to have just a couple of them take off and be like the dominant fish. And you'll also have runts where you'll have very small fish in that same group that just never get to be large. As far as they are green terror. If they are green terror hybrids, what should I watch for? Watch for a lot of dead fish. No, they will be most likely more aggressive than natural blue acara. Natural blue acara typically aren't very aggressive, where the green terrors are. They're going to grow larger because the green terrors are larger fish. They're going to get more green. Look for that spot that you normally see with the green terrors. That could be something. And definitely keep an eye on them. Now, depending on the size of the tank, it might work out fine. But, green, obviously, time will tell. As they start to color up, as they start to get a little bit larger, they'll take on the shape more of a green terror and probably show some colors that are not usual, like you're already starting to see. So Who knows? It might be even cooler looking fish than what you thought they would be. All right, let's see here. All right, we're scrolling on down. Let's take a few more questions, and then we'll think about calling it a night, because this one over here is like gasping for oxygen, I guess.
Well, this is pretty late for me. Okay, wait. There was somebody.
Math makes us all sweaty.
You,
Yeah.
You like flash. I don't remember. All right, I don't know who said this, but somebody asked or noted that there's a lot of bald fish keepers. Do you know KG Tropicals?
Who's KG Tropicals?
Your cousin.
I don't
remember? He looks just like you.
Oh, is that John
kidding.
guy? Yeah, I don't know what's going on with us. So
Yeah.
there's me and John. John's a great guy. John and Lisa, yes, we like them very much.
Yeah,
we know
they're
them.
very sweet.
Looking forward to hopefully seeing them at some of the Aquashellas and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool things. That's what I'm looking forward to. Is I really miss seeing a lot of the other, like obviously all the people who watch the videos and hanging out with you guys and getting to meet you, and then also the other people who are on YouTube. So John and Lisa is definitely one of those. Couple of those people that we are looking forward to seeing hopefully in 2021.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Now you messed me up because I thought I had a
Sorry.
good question here. Hold on. Nicole said, topic for next science fish talk. My 100-gallon tank is making chlorine. Hold on. My 100-gallon tank is making chlorine. I test Saturday before weekly water change, 0.8 chlorine, and after water change, 0, but next Saturday back. 100-gallon tank is making chlorine. I test Saturday before weekly water change. So you're saying you're getting registerable amounts of chlorine, but after the water change, it's 0. I'm going to have to think about that one. I don't have an answer for you right now. My biochemistry part of my brain is not functioning at this point, but let me think about that, because that is an interesting thing.
Huh.
It is. All right, let's see here. Oh my gosh, everything just jumped on me. So that's your fault because it scrolled down. Farmer T says, what was the name of the white sand you use? So what's your favorite white sand?
Well, it depends. The super white is Top Fin. It's from PetSmart.
Okay.
I don't know if I would say that I like it. I like it when there's no fish in the tank, or if you use it with no water. Then it's really great because it's very super white. So the day after you set it up, it's going to be dirty. It shows everything. It looks really, it's a nice bright white sand. But the other one that is close to a white that had a finer grain, wasn't that a Carib Sea?
I like the Carib Sea.
Yeah,
the Carib Sea. So you can do a couple things depending on what you're trying to achieve. There's Carib Sea Cichlid mix, which is going to buffer the pH a little bit higher, and then they've got the Carib Sea Naturals. Mm-hmm. That's a nice sand too. I like that one a lot. So both of them are good. Mm-hmm. But I would say the Top Fin white sand is a little bit too white for me, and like you said, it tends to get a little messed up as time goes on. Assorted Aquatics asks, this is a good question too, can ick cysts attach to roots of floating plants? I would assume when treating a tank that everything in the tank could potentially be contaminated. I am not a big fan of moving stuff out of a tank when I know there's disease in the tank. So I know a lot of people sometimes are question, okay, should I remove the sick fish that has the ick parasite into a tank and treat that? At that point, if you've got ick cysts on a fish that weren't there when you put the fish in the tank, assume that it's also in the substrate. So you've got to treat that tank anyway. So I would assume anything that was there, your media, your filters, any decorations, your substrate, that there could be ick attached. The last thing I would want to do is move that stuff to another tank before treating. I know it presents some problems because now you're limited in terms of what you can do with the salt and what you can do with the temperatures, but I would just assume everything is contaminated. Treat the entire tank until you don't see any spots on your fish. I continue to treat that tank for at least 7 days after the last spot is seen, sometimes 10 days. And then I start to do water changes just to get some of that stuff out of there. So that's kind of how I roll with that.
I saw my name.
You saw your name. There it is. Dinky Winky Dog.
That's cool. Has Joanna found all the new lowboy tanks that they're coming out with? I just bought one. I know the one that we should have gotten.
Yeah, I told you 15 times.
I know, but we had nowhere to put it at the time.
It doesn't matter. It's like that. It's ever mattered.
I know. I just bought one the other day, and I bought another one that's on pre-order, but they're nano tanks, 11.4 gallon and 22.4 gallon. That was
the 22 was the one we were looking at.
Yeah.
That's a really nice tank. You're going to enjoy that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool low boy type nano tanks. If I were to go that direction again, though, I'd probably do something stupid and be like, oh, I want an 8-foot low boy. I really do. I don't know if I could get that in the basement with the way the stairs are, but I would probably try to do, if not like 8 feet tall, at least 6 feet, but then also go like 3 feet wide instead of 2. And it would be just, I mean, that's not unusual. It's like a larger frag tank, but it would be awesome. 6 feet long.
You said 6 feet tall.
Six foot tall.
First you said 8 feet. You're like, no,
8
not
feet long.
6 feet tall. I'm trying
well,
to
because I'm thinking about putting it down the stairs and standing it up. So that's why I was saying tall. But sorry, 6 feet long by 3 feet wide. But I also would probably do 12 inches tall instead of 10, just because. I don't know why not. Pretty soon it's not a low boy anymore. Yeah, I did a low boy that was 8 feet long and 4 feet wide and 30 inches tall. Dude, but I mean, it's a low boy for someone who's 8'3".
But yeah, the next time that we run across any kind of a nano low boy, yeah, I'm gonna get it.
You're gonna do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's see. We'll do 2 more questions. How about that? 2 more. Let's see here. This says, Jason's ick video saved my whole tank. I didn't lose a single fish. He knows his stuff when it comes to the science of fish and water. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. I am glad that everything worked out well. So, and that video is just what I've done for many, many years. And so it's worked. Glad it's helping people. That's good to hear.
Yay.
Noelle says, I find the top fin sand sucks up significantly more when vacuuming than my play sand or pool filter sand. Don't know that it's finer, just seems lighter weight. That's true. Yeah. So the top fin, I mean, it's kind of a misnomer in a sense. The top fin sands really aren't sand. They're more just like more pulverized gravel. Right? So it's just more pulverized. Probably the way they got to that is like, all right, we're going to do all this gravel, and then, oh, wait, we've got this stuff that's too small to call gravel at the bottom of whatever bin we're using to make sand. Gravel. We'll just call it sand. Can we just smash it a little bit more? We'll just call it sand. And people are like, hey, look at that, I got sand. So that's probably, you're right, it's a little bit lighter. Now, I personally don't have a problem, probably because when you're gravel vacuuming that stuff, obviously one of the biggest determinants of whether or not stuff is going to get sucked through the gravel vac is how the difference between the height of your tank and where the exit is from your gravel vac. So for us, I haven't gotten to a stage where the tank is so tall and where the water is exiting in our wastewater system, where that difference is so great where it's sucking the stuff up. So it works for us. But I could definitely see if you've got either a wider gravel vac or it's going into a bucket and maybe there's a bigger difference where maybe some of it could get removed from the tank. All right, let's see here. Jackie says, looking for instructions on how to proceed with a fishless cycle after you add the Fritz fishless fuel and Fritz Zyme 7, and then what? Having difficulty finding info on how to proceed. You can add fish. So what we've done, and we've done this, I think your entire your nano wall, every single one of those tanks had an unseated sponge filter, and we used the Fritz Zyme 7 only. Put that in the tank as directed, and then we added a fish, which was usually a betta. So the trick there is, with the Fritz Zyme 7, you are getting live nitrifying bacteria. That's the great thing about it. And the idea is, the whole reason to do that is you can add something to the tank pretty much at the same time. That's what we've always done. But what you want to do is be very careful. And so you want to make sure that when you add the Fritz Zyme 7, let's say you've got a 20-gallon tank. If I had a 20-gallon tank and I added Fritz Zyme 7, I might only add a couple of small fish to start out with, just so that those microbes that we added have an opportunity. Okay, like now there's ammonia in there, and now we can get going. But you can add as soon as you do that, but just be what I tell people is just don't be in a hurry, and then you'll be okay. Just very few fish. Any suggestions? Any suggested heater for a 10-gallon planted betta tank? I don't have a specific. Well, the brand I like the most is the Eheim heaters that are adjustable. So they've got an adjustable dial at the top. So I tend to use those the most. Heaters are notorious for not lasting a long time. My only suggestion would be make sure you have a heater that has an adjustable dial, and it's not one that's just preset to 76 or 78. You'll have an easier time with that kind of a heater. So pick a brand and then you should be okay. All right, let's see here. Triton says, have a good night, everyone. Great stream. Wishing you all a no smelly tank future. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. So I think we're going to call it a night because it's getting late. We're hitting the hour and a half, almost on the dot.
Wow.
You know, when we first started these streams, we always said it's going to be 60 minutes. 60 minutes, and we'll be calling it a night, and we just can't do that now because you guys are all so fun to hang out with. So I guess that's just the way it is. It's your fault. It's your fault that we do it longer than an hour on the live streams because you guys are cool.
Stop being so fun.
So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the super chats and stickers and all the support that you show us. Thank you to Mary Page and Riddle for doing all the things and keeping up with everything, because I know it's a work. You know, it's definitely stuff you have to do. Got a video coming out Friday. You'll be on the small scape on Saturday. Hopefully, we'll see you here again next Wednesday. Same time, same place, 8 o'clock. And we'll see you then. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Not weekend yet, though.
Well, it's kind of a weekend.